everyone. I'm Susan McClain. Welcome to the eXp Executive Masterclass. Today, we're going to talk about something that I spend a lot of time talking to our team leaders about, and I think something that keeps a lot of our team leaders awake at night, which is how do you balance profit and performance in your real estate team? So in simple terms, let's call it, how do you run a profitable team without losing your top agents, right? Because that's a fear for a lot of us. So before we dive in, I just want to say really quickly that this training is designed for eXp agents. It is high level. I don't tell you in here, I'm not going to tell you, what to do or you've got to do A, B, and C, but I am going to give you some ideas. And if you have any questions about, does this apply to me or what should I do, always make sure that you're contacting your broker. So before we dive into, we've got 10 principles of running a profitable team today. Before we dive into it, I really want to get clear about one thing. And that's the fact that I really don't care about your numbers or your profit as much as I care about your nervous system and your mindset, right? It's really hard on your nervous system to run an unprofitable team. And if you've, like me, if you've done that in the past, you understand, right? You probably feel that sentence. You're like, yes, it is hard. And now sometimes I'm not saying it's super easy to run a profitable team because sometimes we have to have some difficult conversations in order to run a profitable team. But it's just like negotiating our commission, right? Which is hard in the beginning, but we learn scripts and we learn value and it becomes a lot easier. And it's the very same thing with running a profitable team. So your nervous system absolutely matters more than your P&L, but they are tied together, right? So you can't build an unprofitable team. You can't structure, have an unprofitable structure out of fear that the person, of a person who's probably going to leave you anyway, right? Sometimes we twist and we turn ourselves inside out to keep an agent who will end up walking out the door anyway, no matter what we do. And I had a mentor of mine years ago tell me that every single person on your team will leave you eventually. It's just a question of when. Now, you could say that's a depressing thought, but I choose to think that it's a freeing thought, actually, because when we do these things, when we give everything to someone else, right, our team members, and we're just, again, twisting ourselves inside and out, it affects our nervous system. It affects our mindset, our profitability. So we have to balance. And that's what this class is about today. So now, I don't know about you guys, but I get John Cheplack's emails, and he sent an email a couple days ago, and I thought it was great. It was about hiring the right people for your team. And he said, if they lack a business mindset, if they have a scarcity mentality, if they count other people's money, and that one gave me goosebumps, right? If they count other people's money, if they don't understand the cost of time and money to acquire a customer, and they don't understand investment versus return, they aren't a good fit. Walk away. Those are John Cheplack's words, and I thought that they were actually spot on. So yes, I approve John's message, but think about that, right? So if someone is going to leave you over a fair compensation structure, right? They were probably already halfway out the door. So you're not going to save them by giving away your margin. You're just going to go broke trying to keep them happy, right? And we've all probably been there at one point or another. So today we're going to talk about 10 core financial principles that can transform how you think about running your team. And these are actual strategies that some of our top, most profitable, not largest, most profitable teams use when they run their team. And you probably know, if not all of them, you probably know most of these. But I think it's a lot of times we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught something, right? So let's get started. Principle number 1 is define and price. I should have added that to the slide. Define and price your value proposition. And I've seen a lot of team leaders struggle with this. They really can't articulate what they actually provide. If I asked you to list every single service, every single thing that you do for your agents and what it costs you, most of you couldn't do it, right? And that's okay because it's not something that we think about day in and day out. But that's also why it can be hard to justify splits, right? And what the fees are when someone joins your team. And your value proposition, I met with an agent the other day and I asked her about this. Like, what's your value proposition? And it's not something vague, right? It's not this like really high up, like we support our agents or we give you leads. It really needs to be concrete. And it could be like some of the things listed there, right? Is it listing management, ISA support, showing agents, field runners? Do you give office space and amenities, right? Think about the extra amenities in that office space. Social media, marketing, TC, CRM and tech stack, training, coaching, signage, admin, right? Those were the things off the top of my mind, but the list could go on, and every single one of these has a cost. So when you list all of the things that you provide, all of your team members, and then you assign that monetary value to each one, it's a lot easier to justify your margins, right? And whatever your splits are. Now, the more of these that you provide, so a high touch team you can have higher margins, right? If you provide one of these, then you're not going to be able to have as much of a split, right? You're going to have lower margins. And that's not a right or a wrong way to run a team. There's not a right or a wrong answer to that. But you need to know which one you are. How much are you giving? Because that's going to affect your margins and what you charge. Now, at the same time, though, you also have to look at your ideal agent avatar, your ideal team member avatar. Do you want to bring on a bunch of brand new agents because you love training? And boy, you're so good at like training them up the right way and not having to fix all the bad habits. Or maybe you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're like, I just want to work with seasoned agents who need community and culture, and they bring their own book of business. Again, no right or wrong, but what each one of those team members needs and wants is a completely different value proposition. So define your avatar and make sure that your value stack fits what your avatar needs. And then another best practice, and this is something I see a lot of team leaders forget about, right? Because we've got so many things flying at us, but they forget to overlay your value stack as a team leader with eXp's value stack. Too many team leaders just talk about what they offer, and they don't incorporate the eXp value stack. And hands down, the best value proposition is what you provide and the overlay of what eXp provides. So don't forget to add that to your value proposition because it's worth a lot of money. It's worth the training, the support, all of that adds value to what your team's already providing. So before you set or adjust any kind of a split with your team members, make sure that you've created that list, that comprehensive list, and that's going to help you as you have those conversations with your team members about what their splits are. Now, a lot of team leaders that I work with and meet with, they sometimes struggle with this part because they underestimate the value of what they provide. And they're only looking at what do I need to offer to keep an agent, right? And I have so many conversations where they say, well, but why would an agent pay that, to be on my team? I'm not special. And I'm saying, but you are special, right? So even if you just look at, maybe it's just training and coaching that you provide, and you've got 15 years in the real estate industry, think about how many training sessions you went to, how many eXp concessions, how much investment did you put into your own coaching and training? How much did it cost you to do the, hundreds or thousands of transactions that you've closed in your career, and think about all of the knowledge that you've gained from that. There is a monetary value to that, and it's huge, right? I met with a team leader the other day, and she was creating a team of highly trained, very specialized agents who are all productive in their own right. And she said, but why would they pay to join my team? And I said, because they're just as burnt out as you are, right? They don't have time off. They don't have someone who can show houses for them. They can't go on vacation. They don't have a community of agents who are cheering them on and helping each other. And, raising each other up and, creating that accountability that we all need in our business. So that's why they would join your business. That is worth gold. So it doesn't matter what your avatar is. Just make sure that you've defined it and understand what value stack you need to support that avatar. So that was one. Principle number 2 is to run your team as a true business. And this is the principle that kind of sets apart team leaders from business owners. If your team only makes money because you personally close deals, you don't have a business, right? You have a job, and none of us want a job. So I met with a team leader the other day and I said, how profitable is your team? And he said, we did pretty well. We made, whatever. He gave me a number and I said, that's great. And I said, what are your splits? And he said, well, I charge a fee, per closing. And I said, okay, that's great. And I said, so if we remove your production from your team's production, I'm going to assume you wouldn't be profitable. And he said, well, actually, no, I guess I wouldn't be. And I said, so you personally are paying for your agents to do business. And we could go deeper and say, your family is paying for those agents to do business, right? And he said, actually, yeah, that's actually a true statement. So he said, how do I change that? And so that's what we're working on. And we're actually going through a lot of the stuff that we're covering in this class today. So separate your personal production from your team production and evaluate your business as if your personal sales didn't exist. And ask yourself, do the numbers still work? If the profit disappears when you remove yourself, you're not building a business, you're subsidizing someone else's, right? And I see it all the time of team leaders who will close 20, 30, 40, whatever, 50 transactions. And they think, oh my gosh, I'm making a lot of money on my team. This is great. I love it. Then they look at the actual P&L without their production and they realize that they're losing money every month. The reality of being a team leader, and you all know this, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but you make your investment on the first of the month, right? When all of your bills come out, the office space or the tools, the systems, the software, whatever you've got to run your team, all those bills come out and you're in the negative 5,000, 10, 20, doesn't matter, whatever amount, you're in the negative and you only make $1 once a certain number of homes are sold by your team, right? Now your agents, so that's you, your agents on the other hand, they only have to make their investment as they sell a house. So their risk level is different than yours. And so that compensation structure should reflect that different risk that they have versus what you've got. So start viewing your P&L without your personal production. And then that's your real business, right? And then that actually can open our eyes to a lot of the changes that we need to make. Okay, principle number 3, establish your profitability goals. So you don't need to, you do. You do need to decide what level of net profit you're truly aiming for. And if you don't know where to start, and a lot of team leaders don't, and that's okay. I would say aim for a 15% net margin. That's a good goal if you have no idea where to start as far as a net margin goal. But what's important is that you define profitability for your team based on what your goals are, not what someone else is doing or what someone else says their profitability is. If a team is growing rapidly, a lot of times they will sacrifice profit for short-term growth because they're hiring staff and investing in systems and all of the things that they need to grow. But then as growth slows, they need to put their aim back on profitability. And some of those leaders who are in growth mode, they reinvest every dollar. Again, not a right or a wrong answer. It doesn't matter if you're optimizing for cash flow or if you're optimizing for growth. The wrong approach is not deciding at all, right? And just letting it go where it wants to go. So just decide, are you optimizing for cash flow or are you optimizing for growth? And when we talk about net margin, we are really talking about your revenue, that money that comes in to your team minus the cost of sale, right? So that's the agent compensation minus all of your operating expenses. And then that's your net. If you're running at a 15% net margin, you're probably building a pretty good, sustainable, scalable business. If you're below 10%, Could you be a quarter, a bad quarter away from being in trouble? Maybe. If you're above 20%, are you under investing in growth? Or maybe you've cracked the code that a lot of team leaders haven't, right? Again, I'm just talking in general terms here. Larger teams versus smaller teams have different margins. But it's important to understand, what is your margin? Are you optimizing for cash flow or for growth? And are you every single month looking intently at what your goal is? So figure out what your net margin is now, and write down your net margin goal, and make sure that you're not writing what sounds good, right? Well, she said 15%, so that's going to be my goal. Make sure that your goal is what you actually need to sleep at night, to pay yourself fairly, and to build a team that lasts a really long time. So principle 4 is, principle 4 is a reminder. It's a reminder that anytime you're talking about financials, either with another team leader at a mastermind, or you're just, someone that you work closely with, or if you're talking to someone on your own team, on your own leadership team, make sure that you're speaking the same language. So for the purpose of this class today, what I'm talking about, just for clarity, the gross revenue is what your company or what your team actually received. So if you closed a referral lead from, let's call it Zillow, and you've got to pay Zillow a referral fee, that referral fee isn't part of your gross revenue. That's Zillow's gross revenue, right? So for this conversation, gross revenue is what your team actually received minus your agent compensation, which is cost of sale, right? And that's your gross margin. That's what you have to operate your company or your team. Then you've got your operating expenses, and then that's your net profit. So if you express that as a percentage, that's your net margin. So just for clarity, that's the vocabulary that I'll be using today. But get your leadership team to aligned on the definitions that you decide. Is it, these definitions? Do you count referral revenue? But what is it? As long as you're talking the same language and everyone understands, that's a win. So every P&L review, every conversation, you're using the same language. And principle number 5 is to control compensation and protect your margin. So this is where the math starts mathing, right? So this is where a lot of team leaders, though, can struggle even before they start to play the game, right? Your blended compensation, the average percentage that you pay to your agents across all deal types, is one of your most critical health metrics. And so if you want to achieve a 15% net margin, right? And again, just for clarity, I'm just using that 15. You decide what your net margin is. But if you want to achieve a 15% net margin, you've got a couple examples here. So if your blended compensation payout is 50%, you've got 35% left for operations and expenses to hit your 15% profit goal. But if your blended compensation is 70, you have 15% for your operations and expenses if you want to have that 15% profit goal. So in these two examples, who's got the better employees? Who's got more marketing, or maybe better marketing? Who has more firepower for tools and systems? And sometimes growth is better attained with a better value stack than a better split, right? But it depends, again, on who you're attracting to your team. At that 70% payout, you've got 15% to pay your ISAs, your transaction coordinators, your office space, your marketing, your tech stack, your admin, everything, right? Is that sustainable? I don't know. Maybe that's a question for you, that you need to answer, not that I need to answer. But just look at those, just look at everything that has to come out of whatever percent you've got earmarked for the operations and expenses. And then also, again, reminder, what is that ideal agent avatar? Because what attracts a new agent versus a top producer is very different, right? So track your blended compensation payout monthly and make any adjustments before your margins start to shrink. It's just something that we have to look at consistently. Most team leaders don't realize that they're creeping up to 70, 75, 80% until it's too late. And then they can't afford to hire the people that they need, or the systems, or the marketing, or whatever they might need. And they wonder why it feels so hard to run a team. And it can be, right? If it's not aligned according to what your goals are. So principle number 6 is designing smart split structures. So we talked about blended compensation, right? So we'll talk about split structures. And again, this is a high level conversation. Depends on your avatar, depends on your market, right? So there's a lot of things going into play here. But many team leaders will have different split structures based on different deal types. So they will take a personal deal of a team member, their sphere of influence, something that comes from that team member's own database or past clients or their sphere. And especially if you're a lead gen team, right? So if you offer leads to your team members, a lot of them will have a different split for personal or sphere of influence deals. And that's just going to help them retain those agents. It also incentivizes them to keep growing that piece of their business, that segment of their business, which doesn't have a referral fee to, an outside company. So I've seen anywhere 60-40, 90-10 in the agent's favor, depending on production, volume, how long they've been with the team, and depending on your value stack, right? Because a high value team, if you do everything on that, that list that we went through a few slides ago, you can charge more than a team who provides one or two of those things. No right or wrong, you just have to figure that out. And then company generated leads, right? So the opposite end of the spectrum are those leads that are team provided or company or team provided leads. And that's where you can have a lot more aggressive splits in the team favor. So it could be 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, right? In favor of the team if your structure supports that high service. And 50-50, a 50-50 split on a team-generated lead may not be enough to stay profitable. If you provide the ISAs, the TCs, the showing agents, the marketing, the social media, the signage, right? The field runners, all of the things. If you paid for the lead, you nurtured it, or your team nurtured it, you provided all the infrastructure for that lead, the split needs to reflect that investment. Now, some team leaders also charge a transaction fee, right? So they say, hey, of those higher split deals, any transaction where the agent receives more than 20%, 30, 40, whatever it might look like for your team, there's a transaction fee that's attached to it. Because the higher splits, sometimes you're barely covering your overhead, right? So a transaction fee makes sense for some teams, for them to say, hey, this helps me to afford the staff to actually help you close the deal. Others choose not to charge a transaction fee. Some will charge a desk fee, right? If they've got dedicated office space and, that's something that's available for all their team members to use, some of them will charge a desk fee. And it just offsets those facility costs, right, that exist whether your agents are selling a deal or not. And we all know we've hired new agents and they don't ever close something, and unfortunately they fall out of the business. But there's so much that's attached to them, right, with the training, just the office space, all of that. So whatever it is you decide to provide, whatever your splits are, again, higher touch, higher margins, lower touch, lower margins, but just be honest about what you provide to your team members, price it fairly, and make sure that it's sustainable for you and for your team members, whatever that looks like. And now principle 7 is running lean and auditing monthly. So profitability comes from discipline, not volume. And I'm going to say that statement again because I think it's really important. Profitability comes from discipline, not volume, right? Austin Chevron, he was doing a profitability training for a group of team leaders on Team Leader Academy a while back. And he said, review your P&L by the 20th of every single month. He said, not the 30th, not when you get around to it, but the 20th. It gives you time to catch some of the overspending and make any adjustments or corrections before the end of the month. And if your expenses are a little bloated, right? So you're exceeding your goal, or you want to cut down whatever that percent is that you're putting into that expense category, target an annual reduction of 10%. Or maybe it's renegotiating one of your leases, your cost categories every single quarter. But just look at your spend and ask yourself, of every single item on that P&L, ask yourself, is this an investment or is this a spend? Investments will generate returns. They're going to pay for themselves, right? If you provide coaching to your team members, but it improves lead conversion, that's an investment. That's great, right? Can you prove that it's improving your conversion rate? Software that's going to automate some of your tasks or save time, that's an investment. But a spend is just a spend, but feels good when you do it, right? So it's like my Amazon, addiction or whatever, right? Your shopping addiction, like, ooh, it feels so good when it comes. And then you look at the P&L and you're like, darn it, maybe I shouldn't have bought that, crazy thing from Amazon. But spends are spends. They feel good, but they're not always necessary. And they don't move the needle, right? So that's the difference. And so being intentional is an important piece of running a profitable team. So every single dollar that you spend should either generate revenue, save time that can create more revenue, or prevent a larger cost down the line, right? And again, you might invest in your team on the short term, but then make sure that you've got your eye back on that profitability metric. So if it doesn't do one of those things, if it doesn't generate revenue, save time that can create more revenue, or prevent a larger cost down the road, why are you spending it, right? So take a look at that P&L by the 20th of each month. And by the way, P&L reviews are not optional. When I ask a lot of team leaders, like, when was the last time that you reviewed your P&L? And it's like, with my, when I did my taxes last year, right? They are the heartbeat of your business. And if you're not reviewing them on a consistent basis, it's really, really easy to start hemorrhaging money and not even know it, right? Because this little thing adds up and this little thing adds up. And we see that in our personal side too. So principle number 8 is scaling with systems and not bodies. So something I see a lot of team leaders say and think is that they need to grow, and that means adding more team members, right? But it doesn't necessarily, because why hire 10 agents to close 40 deals? It's so much better to have 4 agents doing 10 deals, right? As if you have to support them, train them, coach them, and manage every single person. And a lot of times, like, touching all of the transactions that they're doing, right? The GATA minutes and the questions and all of that. More bodies means more complexity. It does not necessarily mean more profit. So hire only when opportunity exceeds capacity, and not before. Not because you want to hit a certain agent count, right? Not because someone seems like they might be a good agent. I've hired a lot of agents over the years that I thought, they're going to be a slam dunk, right? Like, oh my gosh, they're just going to turn this team or this brokerage around. And they never do anything, right? They end up getting out of the business. So sometimes what seems like a good fit isn't. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you've all experienced it. But before you add another agent, always ask yourself, do we have the systems to support them? Do we have the leads? Do we have the infrastructure? And build your systems first. So automate everything that you can, create your SOPs, right? And make sure that your agents know and are using those SOPs. I talked to a team leader the other day, and he talked about all of the, really the GATA minutes, right? The like, hey, where do I find this? Hey, where do I get that? Hey, how do I do this? And where do I do that? And I'm like, well, do you have SOPs? Do you have processes laid out? And he said, yes, like, but they're not using them. And he's like, oh yeah, like I really just need to remind them over and over and over again. And I learned something a long time ago, and it's so true. When you get tired of saying something is when they start to hear it. So in his mind, he's like, well, I've told them that we have this process and we have this SOP and here's what it looks like, or here's where to find this thing that you're looking for. But telling them once or twice or even 3 times doesn't mean that they're going to get it. When we are so sick of saying it that we just want to like, I can't say it one more time, that's when they actually start to hear it. So make sure you have the SOPs, make sure you have the templates, the processes, right? Everything so that you're automating everything, you're touching as the team leader as few things as possible. And that's when you can add people to execute those systems. And it could be adding team members, right? To, slot into the SOPs and the processes that you've set in place. It could mean investing in your leadership team, right? So that they do take some of those gotta minutes off of your plate. But the best teams that I know and I've studied aren't the biggest. They're the most efficient. They're the ones who've built machines, right? That produce results without requiring the team leader to handhold everything. So if you are in that space, we've all been there where you feel like you're hand-holding everything, start building those systems, start building the processes and the machine to hand a lot of that stuff off. And so stop measuring success by the size of your team. Start measuring success by profit per agent, transactions per agent, right? What's that PPP? What's that per person productivity? What's your net margin? Those are the numbers that matter, not how many bodies you have on your real estate team. Okay, principle number 9 is investing. Investing in people, in culture, in training. Something that can potentially save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars is to prioritize coaching and lead gen over buying leads, right? So coaching and lead gen, how do you coach and train your agents to generate their own leads? I see team leaders spend massive amounts on lead sources and then wonder why their agents can't convert, right? And it's because they're solving the wrong problem. It's typically not a lead problem. It's a skill problem. And sometimes it turns into a team problem where more than 20 or 25% or 30% of your business is coming from a lead source that you can't control. And team building 101 is don't build on shifting sand, right? So make sure that you control the majority of leads coming into your team. If 50%, 70%, right, of your transactions come from a lead source that you don't control, start making shifts now. And send your agents through FastCap, through go to expuniversity.com, right? There's our AI training. There's our sphere of influence training. Let us do it for you. It doesn't mean that, when I say, it's a skill problem that you've got to, now I've got to add another training to my, everything else we're doing. Let us train your agents. Send them through FastCap, send them through something else. And while you're at it, use FastCap as a litmus test for your agents. For those agents on your team who are underproducing, set a requirement for them to not only attend, but finish FastCap and do all of the homework, right? If they don't do it, are they a fit for your team? I don't know. That's your decision, not mine, but use it as a litmus test, right? If they're not willing to go through FastCap, complete it and do all the homework, are they willing to do everything else that you ask of them, right? So hire coachable agents who want systems and not the ones who want free leads, right? The agents who want leads handed to them, many of them won't ever be satisfied, right? The commission split will never be high enough. The leads will never be good enough. The agents who want to get better, regardless of leads, right? Maybe you do offer leads as part of your team. Fabulous, right? But make sure that the agents that you're hiring, they want systems, they want coaching, they want a path to mastering their real estate business. That's your ideal team member. And it's great if you provide leads. It's great if you don't provide leads, right? Doesn't matter. Just make sure that you're hiring the agents who want the systems. You can have the best leads in the world, but if your agents aren't converting them, it's burning money, right? So make your agents, invest in your agents and making them better. And then everything else on the team becomes so much easier. All right, we're at number 10, principle number 10, which is sustainability, right? Long-term sustainability. So this one is about protecting everything that you've built on your team. So, and I don't see a ton of team leaders doing this, but I would say definitely never, ever use sponsorship or MSA money to cover an unprofitable team. So if your core business doesn't work without any kind of external income, you don't have a strong business, right? You've got a wobbly business, and no one wants a wobbly business. So sponsorship or revenue share should be bonuses, but not band-aids on your team, right? They can cover growth initiatives, but they shouldn't cover losses. Especially, again, remember to take out your production and look at your profitability without your production. But stay compliant with all lead sharing, vendor agreements, right? It's not worth it. One compliance violation can mess up years of work, right? So plan for the future of your team and ask yourself, what happens to profit if I add 5 agents? You should know the answer to that question. What if my blended compensation average increases by 5%, right? What does that look like? What else could I invest in? What if marketing costs increase this year by 10%, right? Or what production volume does adding an admin make sense? So make sure that you plan for the future of your team. You should be able to, scenario out each of these and not just react to what's happening. And then ask yourself, can my business model work in a market even worse than the one that we're in, right? What if the market turns? Does my model still work? If you need kind of that perfect market condition to be profitable, then it's not sustainable, right? It's just that luck that's coming in. So build with resilience, build for the long term, and build something that can weather market shifts, economic changes, anything that comes your way. So closing, I'm actually going to bring this home with where we started, right? Which is that your nervous system matters way more than your P&L. And what I mean by that is, remember, if we're making decisions out of fear that agents will leave, fear that, we'll lose the top producer, or that you're not generous enough, you're going to build an unprofitable business. And nothing sustainable comes from that fear. And the person who would leave you over fair and justified compensation, they were already looking for the exit. So you're not going to save them by giving away your margin. You're just going to hurt yourself, right? But the agents who understand value, they appreciate systems, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Those agents will stay when you run a profitable, sustainable business. And again, I meet with a lot of agents, and they, I think it's this internal thing, right? By the way, a lot of team leaders, when we look at the 3 primary drivers of a real estate agent, it's either making money, it's personal achievement, or it's helping others. There's no good or bad answer to that, but those are the 3 primary drivers of someone in the real estate industry. And a lot of team leaders, their primary driver is helping others. That's why they've been so successful. That's why they grew their business so rapidly, and a lot of times so quickly. They had to start a team because they absolutely love helping others. They love helping their clients. Then their business grew, and then they had, they hired a buyer's agent or an admin or whatever it looked like to grow their team. And they're still in that, I love helping others. That's kind of their love language in real estate, right? And so a lot of times, if helping others is your primary driver in real estate, there's this internal thing that says, profits, it's a little bit greedy, right? It just doesn't feel good, right? And it's not greedy, it's responsible, because it allows you to hire the best people, invest in better marketing, provide the absolute best support in your market to your agents, weathering market changes or downturns. And it allows you to build something that lasts, because you want your agents to feel confident that team is going to last, right? It also leads by example, because you want your agents, especially if you love helping others, right? You want your agents to build something that lasts, to build a business that lasts. You don't want them to, give away every single dollar of the commission, right? Because it feels good at the time, because it doesn't feel good down the line. And it's the exact same thing as a team leader. If you treat profit as an afterthought, right? It doesn't feel good. So I want you to think about, a lot of team leaders treat that profit thought as an afterthought. They say, after fees and splits, how profitable am I? And I want you to flip that to say, what profit do I want or need? And then what structure, splits, fees, expenses, filter those in around the profit that you want or need. And remember, this is your business. You took the risk. You signed the lease, right? You're negative on the first of the month. You deserve to be compensated fairly. And your agents, they only make the investment as they sell homes, right? Their risk profile is different. So compensation reflects that. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for your time today. I hope you go build something that matters and lasts forever. If I can help you, reach out to me on Slack or on the Hub. Thanks so much.